Before we start, I would like to basically head off by saying I started my career also in business. I started a couple of SMEs myself, and I've always been the chairman and the president of the Danish IT Association. So this subject is really, really close to my heart. And with me in the panel today, I would like to present two people who has long-term knowledge in this area. One is Stéphane Boujnah, the CEO of Euronext. It's a company, a funding company, at the heart of the EU capital market. You are former CEO of Santander and also an MD in Deutsche Bank. So a long-standing career in capital.
Santander Global Banking Markets for Continental Europe, so sort of Playmobil CEO. Huh?
And the second participant is Jevgenijs, and I'm not going to say your surname, Kazanins, CEO of TWINO, a peer-to-peer lending platform present in 7 countries. Welcome.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
So the big question of today is basically, how do we actually make these companies stay in Europe? How do we actually make them grow in Europe? How do we get the capital and the funding to let them extend their business in Europe? And I want to just give a short intro. As a president of the Danish Association, we looked upon some studies and found out that, amongst others, 2/3 of what we call the unicorn, basically big SMEs that had the potential of really growing and become big, they left the EU within the 2 first growth phases. So 2/3, you know, for example, Skype, you know, Unity, you know, Just Eat, also Sitecore, Saxo Bank, all of them was actually either bought or left the EU within the first growth phases. And when we asked them why, they said it's the 3M. It's the mindset, it's the money, and it's the market. And when you go a little bit deeper, they say the 3C. They say basically we lack the competences here to expand. We lack the capital, the risk-willing capital, and we don't have a single market. It's too fragmented, it's too difficult to grow across border. It's still not one market, it's still a very fragmented European market. So starting like that, I mean, what is it that you could dream of? If you could ask Mr. Juncker or somebody in the EU, what would you ask of them if they should do 3 things for you in the future to basically make those companies stay and grow in Europe?
Well, first of all, this picture, I think, is just outdated. Most of us, we tend to look at the world as a snapshot, not as a dynamic from it. None of us, 20 years ago, would have imagined that in most business schools in Europe, the top 10 or the top 20% are not anymore interested in making their careers in a large corporate organization or a large consulting firm, but are now interested in setting up their own business. So the cultural mindset has changed profoundly. So whoever believes that the mindset is a restricting factor is looking at a picture 5 years old, 10 years old, but not definitely as the momentum. The same about capital. The capital raising in private equity in public markets is just booming all over Europe. And that's for a combination of reasons. The main one is that if you look for yield, for return on investment in financial markets today, there are not that many asset classes that provide the sort of basic yield you get from equity markets. So the issue, in my view, is more the third one, which you covered, which is a single market. We have achieved as a group of European countries huge things. We have climbed huge cliffs like building a single market, building a single currency, building even a single banking union, which was supposed to be unachievable. So the capital market union, which is for the moment no more than a roadmap, is the absolute thing, the absolute priority. So things as basic as coordination, convergence, possibly harmonizations of bankruptcy law is absolutely critical, because there is no single market if you don't know what happens if the project you have invested fails and gets bankrupt. The second one is obviously the harmonization of securitization. don't know under which conditions the assets you are invested in can be properly securitized over the wider group, it's the same. So I believe that on this front line of insolvency rules, securitizations and single prospectus, single supervision of markets, these are things that are already in the roadmap that needs to be delivered for real now, because that's what is going to get the market to the right scale.
Thank you so much. And may I have your view on the same?
Sure. So brief intro on us. So we are consumer peer-to-peer lender. We're one of the largest peer-to-peer lenders in continental Europe, competing with the likes of German Ox Money and French United Credit. And I would start with saying that we actually love Europe. We operate in 7 countries, operate in the European Union, but we also operate outside in Russia, Kazakhstan and Georgia. And I think there are a lot of great things about Europe, right? Stéphane mentioned a few things, right? A common market. I would say that actually companies and fintech companies in particular looking and living to the US brings a lot of opportunities for people who actually stay here, right? I mean, for us, you know, we're a bootstrap business. We became a leader in just a very, very short time in the scene because we stayed, right? What we're probably missing is continuous effort of harmonization of the market, right? Because if you look at the fintech services, I mean, the landscape, the products innovate so fast, and the legislation base always lags, right? So if we're talking about peer-to-peer lending in particular, the concept has been around for what, 10, 11 years now. There is still no single regulation, and none is coming up in near future, right? So every time we move across the border to a new country, we have to deal with a different regulator. We have to deal with a completely different framework on how lending is regulated, right? Whether you need a non-bank lender license, whether you have to partner with a bank or...
So you would ask him to make that single market
make
work
the single
also
market
in
for lending, right?
Lending.
Lending has changed over the last 10 years. Let's harmonize it, right? And there are clear examples of how it's been done in the UK or in the US. Let's just bring one. And second part, you know, we're a marketplace, so we connect borrowers with the lenders. And again, peer-to-peer concept is not new at all. And still, the lender side or the protection of the investors who invest into peer-to-peer loans is still, you know, up to local governments. You know, in France, these are only professional lenders that can participate in this market. In UK, that's pretty much anyone. You know, in some countries, it's still not regulated. So I'd say European Commission is doing great work with the PSD2 in particular, and bringing kind of legality to fintech innovation. But there are big areas of fintech innovation that are completely not covered at all.
Okay, so I mean, and what you're saying is, well, the money's here, the mindset is changing. So basically what we're missing is still that it's too fragmented, the market. I remember having a conversation over maybe a glass of red wine at LEC at a certain point, and I said, guys, you know, these companies are leaving no matter what, and they are. I mean, if we look at Amazon, Google, all the big companies, they're not exactly born here, and it's okay. I mean, but the big tech companies, we have many tech companies, and if we have very good tech companies in Europe, actually, we don't suffer from creating them, but somehow they don't stay and grow. So do we need like a common European stock? Do we have a European capital market? And is this what we need? Or do we actually need investment from the European Commission, or is it simply regulation issues?
No, I think where the mindset needs to be changed is probably within the European Commission, because speed is not a key performance indicator, a KPI of the European Commission. That's delivering on time is not perceived as fair. Nobody gets fired from the Commission when he's late or when she's late. And that's a problem which clearly, and I know that they have a tough job to do to build consensus and compromises within a diverse group. But that's a fundamental thing. The second thing, which is, in my view, very important, is more than mindset, is quasi-psychological approach from the developers, the owners, the managers of those technology projects in Europe. the big difference between success and failure in life, in anything in your life, is self-confidence. So if you believe that your project is about to grow, will change life, will be relevant, then you want it to grow and you are compromising return now for a big hit later. And that's called going to the public market. Now, if you believe that you have done something smart and that there is a window to extract value, you sell early, you take the money and run. And that's what the missing link is, probably the fact that many smart innovators, smart developers of projects are reaching a critical mass, proof of concept, critical size of clients, first years of EBITDA, and then they say, whoa, I'm going to make 10 times my initial investment, 20 times. It's much more money than I ever dreamed when I was at university. Let's sell it to Adobe or to Oracle. Let's sell it, if you are a fintech, you sell it to a bank. If you are a biotech, you sell it to a pharma group. And let's take the money and run, because it will never happen again. The difference between Zuckerberg and these guys is that some people in the planet think, no, let's think big. Let's accept an IPO discount rather than an M&A premium. Let's go to the market. Let's raise capital and make the company 100 times bigger. And that's what makes the difference. And the difference between the US and Europe has nothing to do with talent, with intelligence, with size of the market. It has to do somehow with fragmentation. I've covered the point, but mainly by thinking big. The US is all about taking ordinary people, making them doing extraordinary things like walking on the moon by applying procedures and thinking it's possible. The difference with Europe is that you have people who are with a much higher education level, but with less ambition. And that's where the mindset gets. I think we are getting there, but the missing link is to have people not only ready to leave university to create companies, but to create company and to think they can make global leaders. And that's all about, success in life is, for anything we do, 50% of self-confidence. The rest is a lot of luck and some talents.
So now we looked a little bit at the fragmentation of the market. And basically, I think that you agree that this is the biggest problem. If we look at a little bit about investment strategy, so we have Horizon 2020, we have initiatives like 4.0, the digital hubs, who are also present here today. I mean, do you see this making a difference? Do you see that these hubs, that specialize around different industries from country to country, that they will become like, the centers of new companies and capital and skills and this? Is it a potential we should even, now we are moving towards the next investment framework and it will be like closing in May. I mean, how do we help this investment to get even better qualified? Should it be private partnerships, or how do you see this kind of investments?
Here I would probably agree with Stéphane on that there isn't lack of money, and we're living kind of up north, and kind of used to have way few investors looking at the region at all, right? But then Estonians came and built Skype, and apparently we're on the map. So I think there is still lack more of ambitious people who want to change the world, right? Or because we're the second generation of New Europe, where there is not that much wealth accumulated. So that's understandable for people to sell companies early. And if you look in fintech in particular, right? I mean, most of fintechs don't even start with willing to change the world or change banking. They start by building something for banks, and I hear that a lot, right? So I think it will take time, right? It will take time for the next generation to come, and I'm actually very optimistic about the region, about the Baltics, right, and the Nordics, right? I mean, the Finns and Swedes and the Danes already do crazy stuff, but the small Baltic countries, I think, coming up, and the reason why they're coming up, it's not because there is a lot of capital injection nowadays from European Union, right, into startups, into accelerators, and so on. It's because we are so tiny that we don't start with our markets. There is no market for us. German company would start and they would build something for German market. It would be even named in German, right? We don't have this luxury, right? So we actually have to maybe not going back to changing the world, but at least doing something on pan-European scale, right? And this is why I believe a lot of innovation can come from the region of smaller EU nations that don't have the luxury of big and wealthy local markets.
So one question for you is, I mean, now you say, okay, it's the mindset of the owners, they should think big, they should conquer the world. This is the only reason why they actually sell out, or they go above the, you know, most of them actually goes to Silicon Valley. But they do this. I mean, is it really only that? Is it that we don't know as Europeans how to think big? I mean, we have big companies. We have, you know, old companies like Siemens and Grundfos and Maersk. And so, I mean, what is it? What is something we lost? Or is it actually that they don't see the scalability, that they don't get the capital injection when they need it? I mean, I heard most of the companies say, you know, we simply lack the people who's willing to work, you know, night and day and really put their hearts into this, and they don't have the right skills. And you know, it's so expensive with salaries, so we need huge investment capital at a certain stage, and it's never like enough, and at a certain point you're just too tired. I mean, it's just too much. So is it only that we don't think big enough, or do we actually lack the capital? And are there mechanisms so we can even make it more visible to them how to get this capital?
No, we don't. We definitely don't lack capital. We may lack liquidity, which is very different. The reason why people sell early is not because they can't raise money. They sell early because they are not sure they will be able to sell high later, which is very different. Because the reality in Europe is that over the past 10 years, not only there has been a fundamental switch in mindset to join small startup type of companies, but there has been rivers of money channeled towards technology companies. Rivers from business angels, private VCs, private equities, government monies, government schemes, local government support in terms of preferred rents. I mean, there is even a thesis about whether or not the technology sector has been indirectly nationalized in Europe with the amount of public support and the taxpayers' money that is injected directly or indirectly into startup companies, BPI France, and all the other schemes that exist. Now, what happened with those companies? They are mushrooming. Okay, a significant part of them will burn the money and disappear, because that's the rule of the game. It's the spermatozoid paradigm. I mean, there is only one winner, sometimes two max. So a vast majority of them will run the race and will either be too late, or they will make mistakes in hiring, or there will be fight against among shareholders, whatever. I don't know whether it's 30, 40, 60%, they will disappear. Another part of it will do what we have just discussed: sell early, take the money and run, because I'm not sure I can do sustain it or do it again. And the last part is, what do they do? Where do they get liquidity? So they can do it in their local market, they can do it in the global market in NASDAQ, or they can go to us if they want to. If they want to go local, they go to the local market. If they want to go global, they go to NASDAQ. If they want to go Europe, they go to Euronext. But not everyone can, I mean, for a few, again, the spermatozoid paradigm, for a few ones who get to the NASDAQ, where you get liquidity, where you get visibility, if any, because being small on NASDAQ it makes you much smaller than in an average market. When you can sustain the cost, it's not a game for anyone. So the reality is how we take those average type of companies that have proved concept, that have reached a critical size, and make them ambitious enough to build from a strong liquidity base that exists in equity markets in Europe, much more global leaders. And for that, we need to fix, as you said, the fragmentation of regulation, because it immediately frees value. I mean, I run a company the exchanges have been created 300 years ago, everywhere we go. But the smart things that have been done in the early 2000s was to merge Lisbon, Paris, Amsterdam, and Brussels, and in the future other markets who want to join us, in one single liquidity pool. So when you were saying to the French companies, you're not anymore listed in Paris, you are listed on a computer where you have one single liquidity pool, one single technology platform, one single order book. Liquidity concentration as such creates value for investors and increases the price of assets. So these are the type of things that the Commission must do, but at a pace which is not the sort of slow motion, de tension pace, but in a much more accelerated way.
So you're looking at like European stock. We're looking at a new concept across all the countries.
Yeah, I mean, in my company, you have what we call a market of reference. You need to be listed somewhere because some corporate law applies to you. But the regulatory environment of the operations on your stock is the same wherever you operate from all the countries that are part of the Euronext network.
Okay, I have a very big agreement. Fix the fragmentation and be more agile. Create a European stock so we can actually have common rules. So let's look just as Brexit. So we all know that UK and London was a big capital center. What does that mean? Is Berlin going to be the new center? Is Paris going to be the new center? We all know that Macron has this vision of bringing all the startups and tech companies into Paris. Is it going to be Paris? Is it going to be Berlin? Who will take lead? Will Europe take lead, or will it be a country?
Okay. I have a very strong view on that one. No need to elaborate on the fact that we are all sad and wounded by the decision of the Brits, because we would by far have preferred to keep this great nation as part of the family. But they have decided to leave. So, you know, Oscar Wilde used to say, marriage is all about fixing together problems you didn't have separately. And the Brexit is the other way around. It's about fixing separately problems you didn't have together. So now they have made their choice. This is their decision. We have to do what is best for us. The reality that no one is analyzing, in my view, with a sufficient level of depth is the historical magnitude of the event. I mean, in my view, in 50 years, when people look at the beginning of the century, they will, in Europe, they will have in mind two events: the implications of the Berlin Wall fall in '89 and the Brexit. It is as deep as that one. I mean, nobody in '91 would have imagined that a fintech startup company will emerge from a NATO country, which happened to be what at that time was still a Soviet republic. So Brexit is the same. Today, most of the corporate clients, the Siemens, Total, Finmeccanica, Philips of this world are on the continent, but most of the bankers that serve them are in London. The single currency is on the continent, but 40 to 70% of the trading of this currency is in London. 80% of the saving is generated from the European continent, but most of the asset managers are in London. Okay, this is all fine when the finance is in Wall Street, the technology in Palo Alto, the movie industry in Hollywood, the oil and gas in Houston, and the cattle and beef in Chicago. But at the moment, London decides to move away from the implicit federal ambition, to move away from the regulatory convergence, it's just becoming an anomaly. There is no reason why 500 million people in the planet, with the highest standard of living in the planet, the richest part of the planet in any respect, are going to say, okay, you know what, we are too dummy, there is something we can't do, we don't know how to manage it, it's finance. That's not true. The reason why London became what it has become over the past 30 years is a combination of many objective skills that are concentrated there, etc., that are very relevant, plus access to the single market. When they move away from the single market, it's another world. And whoever believes that this world has not profoundly changed, whoever doesn't reboot the mindset about the way Europe is going to finance the growth of its company is making a huge historical mistake. Now, which country, which city will become the new center? Not only I don't know, but also I don't care. Because the reality is that we don't need, in a new world, a single center. We will have distributed financial centers. And the four cities that are the front runners, Frankfurt, Paris, Amsterdam, Dublin, are fundamentally different. When you are in Dublin, you are in a city where English is the local language, which is extremely close to the UK, but the geography tells you that it's not as close as the continent markets as London was. When you are in Frankfurt, you are in a great financial center, close to the ECB and so on, but less concentrated economic center than Paris. When you are in Paris, you are in a concentrated, large city, but largest of the four of them, but with probably the biggest cultural gap with London for all sorts of reasons. When you are in Amsterdam, Amsterdam is a twin city of London in terms of weather, in terms of bricks, and in terms of English language, because Amsterdam is a bilingual city, but it's a big, very vibrant city in terms of asset management, but it is smaller. So no one is hesitating for exactly the same project between those four cities. People will relocate depending on where they have already operations and depending on what they want to get from the local environment. So I'm very relaxed about that. What is important though is to realize that the financing of Europe will be fundamentally different in the years to come because of the implications of Brexit.
It's very interesting. So the fall of the Berlin Wall and the Brexit will definitely change, you think?
Yes.
And when we look back in 10 years, these are the two things that we remember. So I mean, what kind of opportunities does it bring for companies like yours? Because you are the fundamental different Eastern European breakout countries of Latvia and that actually made this kind of new lending platform. And how do you think that companies like yours and models or financial models like yours will actually react towards the Brexit?
Yeah, sure. Just a disclaimer, we were recently called finally the Nordics. But anyways, it's not the point. The point was that, just a few years ago, right? I mean, if you're in fintech, you have to be in London. I mean, TransferWise, these are Estonians, right, that headquartered the company in London because it was the place to be. I mean, Revolut guys, right? They are not from London at all, but it was the place to build fintech companies. Even for us, before Brits made the decision, for us it was like, where are you from? When are you in London next time? Let's catch up, right? So essentially everything was happening. I mean, if you look at the people, even at the events, I mean, all the events in fintech were in London, and everything that was happening outside of London was kind of, kindergarten, let's the guys play. So, I mean, I don't know how this will play out, right? Capital will obviously find a way across the border somehow. I'm more curious about the people, right? And the human capital that London actually accumulated. I mean, I still recall a year when 10 my course mates, probably some of the brightest people in the country at that time, graduates, left to London, right? And they stayed there. So if all these people come back to the continent, right? Whether it will be, Baltics or Berlin or France, I think they can bring a lot of innovation with them, right? I mean, they don't have anymore the safety of, working in London and still being a part of the market. So they will probably consider the options of either returning or lending in another place. And I think they can bring this experience and start something new. And that's probably my hope, right? I mean, there's like, at least from my country and the other Baltic states, there is already a generation of people who got their experience and got their education in the kind of capital of finance in Europe, and if they come back, I think there'll be a big change for fintech industry here.
So, I mean, we are at the end. Just summing up, I hear that on the mindset, UK leaving, sadly, the EU might be actually beneficial to the mindset because we might have all these great people actually coming, I would say, back into their original countries with a lot of knowledge on how to finance things, on how to think big, and how to generate liquidity towards SMEs and to create growth. And on mindset, we are still lacking some. We don't think big enough. We're a little bit too secure, and can I get a ticket with my salary each month? Then it's easier. On the market, I think we have a clear message to take back to Brussels, which is we need a common stock, a common financial system. We need to abolish all the fragmentation that we have in finance market and in markets in general, be European instead of just being country by country. Think big, think European, don't think country by country. So, so that solves basically the money, the mindset, and the markets. So, and if you look at what Juncker is doing at the moment, right? He's talking about an EU finance minister to actually solve these types of problems. Is he going in the right direction? Is this a good move?
Yes, as long, I mean, I don't care anymore about institutional framework. I care about output. So it makes perfect sense on the paper. We just need delivery, and we need to find shortcuts. That's why I believe that, for example, on the Capital Market Union, if it is getting too complicated to deliver it with 27, let's make it in the Eurogroup at 19. I mean, the Eurozone is all about telling to the rest of Europe and to the rest of the world, if you don't think it's possible, we kindly ask you to refrain from disturbing the ones who try. And that's what the Eurozone is all about. And that's why it must be probably the framework to deliver quickly what takes longer to deliver if we try to build a consensus at 27.
And can we do that? Can we deliver? Do you think that, is it complicated to create that European stock? Is it something we can do?
As I said earlier, we have done much more complicated things. Creating a single market and disturbing profoundly the life of industrial SMEs and farmers across Europe was a big thing. Killing the rents of protected industries and services was a big thing. Building the single currency and injecting discipline in budget across Europe was a big thing, and it's not perfect. Creating the single banking union was something that was not conceivable until the crisis, and in 2 years the system delivered it. We just need to make it happen with the right level of energy and leadership. So it is feasible. It's much easier to do the convergence of insolvency, the convergence on regulatory environment, on single supervision, than to do what I've just described and that was being achieved in the 70s, 80s and 90s.
Okay, I would like to close the session with this. I think now we have a common vision. I'm not sure I will go with the 19 because I'm coming from a country outside the Eurozone, unfortunately. So I hope that he will stick to his all 27 together and put more pressure on us. But I think at least we leave here with a clear vision of let's have a common European capital market, a common stock. Let's try to kill fragmentation, and let's teach our young people to basically think big, both company-wise but also market-wise, to create a European market and not leaving them behind, having to go overseas each time they have to look for a big chance. Thank you so much for participating. Thank you.
Thank you.